Hello, welcome to another thrilling episode of Real Life. I'm one of the hosts, Mike Wigdor, along with my friend and cinephile, Frank Mandosa. We are here to present the second, part two of the Steven Spielberg, I don't know what you would call his movies, I can't think of the term right now, part two, but it's actually, we're going to be talking about some of his greatest dramas and thrillers that he has tackled. A lot of them all have to do with the themes of war and family. And we're really looking forward to entertaining you with the movies that my friend and Frank Mandosa has picked out for us to discuss today.
Yeah, when it comes to Steven Spielberg, you have really two different careers going at once. You have the fantasy, science fiction, so-called family-friendly fare like E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Indiana Jones. And then you also have the Spielberg that we're going to be talking about today. That Spielberg that feels he feels gravitated towards more substantial fare, films that he felt gave him more credence as a quote-unquote serious film director. I think that along with anybody who has opinions about any form of art, it's safe to say that there are some films that achieve that end more successfully than others. You be the judge. Before we dive right into our first so-called dramatic film, just a little shameless plug for the first Spielberg show that we did. In case you missed it, check it out on YouTube or on the SMAC website, Real Life Spielberg, where we talk about the very films that the family-friendly fare that we just mentioned. That's not today's show, of course. Today we're going to be starting off with stuff that's a bit more heavy-hitting, sometimes even a bit more controversial, and in some cases very gritty and very heavy stuff. That's not necessarily, the phrase I always use is not necessarily a movie to fold laundry by. So the first film, and we're going in the order of original release, the first film that we're going to take a look at was released in 1985. And the title of that film is The Color Purple, based on the best-selling book by Alice Walker. So before we begin talking, let's first take a look at the trailer.
The Color Purple, an American story for the whole world. It's about life, it's about love, it's about us. You will always remember, Mr. Suge. Old Mister. Nettie. Harple, Squeak, Sophia, and Seeley. You will never forget The Color Purple.
First thing to say about this movie in terms of just general fun facts as far as being a movie is concerned. This was released in 1985, and for you film buffs out there who like this kind of trivia, this is the first PG-13 rated film to be nominated for Best Picture. The PG-13 rating came out the same year, 1985, largely in response, by the way, to two previous Spielberg productions, the original Gremlins and the first sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Both films that were rated PG and contained a pretty healthy dose of on-screen violence that resulted in a push for there to be some sort of modification to the rating system. So it is interesting that the first PG-13, once the rating came about, the first PG-13 rated film to be nominated for Best Picture would be yet another Spielberg film, and that's this one, The Color Purple. It got a total of 11 Academy Award nominations. Interestingly enough, not for Best Director. Spielberg did not get a Best Director nod. He did get, as one of the producers, he did get a Best Picture nomination, but not a Best Director nomination. He did win the Directors Guild Award for this film, so I'm sure that was a little bit of salve in the ointment. As far as the film itself is concerned, it is not an easy film to watch. There are some pretty disturbing elements that certainly warrants the rating, the PG-13 rating that it did get, in terms of family dynamics, in terms of depictions of on-screen depictions of domestic abuse. So a lot of sensitive areas. But I do
Frank,
have here.
now I was just going to say, I didn't want to interrupt you, but then, what do you call it? Whoopi Goldberg, she got nominated for Best Actress in the Oscars, correct?
She did. Yeah. She got a Best Leading Actress nomination, as did Oprah Winfrey in the supporting category.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that worked out. Yeah, no, Spielberg said about the film, and I have it here so I can get it word for word. Spielberg said about The Color Purple and the career journey that led him to The Color Purple. He said, and I quote, "The human element has been present in all my films, especially E.T., but The Color Purple is a departure for me, and that it deals with emotional crisis and tremendous emotional growth spanning almost 40 years in the lives of 8 characters. When I first heard what it was about, I didn't think I wanted to direct it. But once I began reading it, I couldn't put it down. I was particularly drawn to the growth of Celie. That's the character Whoopi Goldberg plays. I was particularly drawn to the growth of Celie as she goes from being a contemporary slave in the early 20th century to being a complete and completed person," end quote. And that is straight from Spielberg himself, speaking of the film. Mentioned already that it's based on a book by Alice Walker. Interestingly enough, Alice Walker herself had sort of a meh reaction to the film. She did not feel that it captured the essence of her story the way that she would have liked to have seen. I would imagine that a lot of times authors do get very protective of and rightfully so, protective of their property, and it's a complete and total leap of faith when they sign the release authorizing a film production company to use the story, to use the characters, and to attach the author's name to it. But it is a situation where she felt that the film was lacking in certain regards. She didn't hate it, but there was some apprehension on her part as to some of the directorial choices that he made.
Yeah. I think I like the way that the filming of the movie was very integral to how the emotions were shown in that movie. Like The Color Purple itself, the fields represent when they were happy as children playing in the fields. Like I was wondering what the color purple actually meant, and I looked that up and I saw what how he interpreted it, maybe how she interpreted it, and so but then when she becomes, oddly enough, the property considered to be the property of another black, supposedly someone who was going to, just as her boss. It was her master, or what they called her Mister in the movie. That was almost, not something that would be anticipated if watching a movie about abuse of, black, the black people, black women, back in, I forget, when was that film? Do you remember when it took place?
The film begins in I think it's 1908.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was when the cars were coming out. Yeah, so it was post-slavery times, but supposedly, but it definitely had contrast in there with how, white people dealt with black people as well. So he didn't shy away from any of that. And as he doesn't shy away from controversy, I don't think in any of his movies. And I think I think it's his personal take and how he feels about things that he actually is showing and as a human being and trying to get, wants his audience to kind of feel the same way or see where he's coming from. I think he does that beautifully, I think. That movie was really, I read somewhere that movie was really about courage, the courage that in her journey to go from, the downtrodden, abuse, almost like treated like a slave by another black, man, to becoming, emotionally free and how that happens. And then she becomes a strong person in her own right towards the end and, meets up with her sister. I mean, there's a lot of journeys in it, but I just thought it was very well done. Really was. I thought it was an excellent movie, really.
Well, Spielberg in more recent years has said that, which I would imagine most artists would when they look back at their previous work, he said that there are a few things he would have done differently now had he been in the position to make the movie now. But he made it the way that he made it. It was 1985, and he did regard it as his first serious film, which certainly helps to pave the way for some further dramas that he did. 1987's
right.
Empire of the Sun, and our next film, the movie that would really put him at the zenith of his career in terms of achievement and accomplishment, 1993's Schindler's List, which is,
Absolutely.
of course, a film that is very harrowing. But let's take a look at the trailer, and then we'll dive into Schindler's List discussion.
Okay.
By law, I have to tell you, sir, I'm a Jew.
Well, I'm a German. So there we are.
You want these people?
My people, I want white people.
Who are you, Moses?
They say your factory is a haven. They say you are good.
Who says that?
Everyone.
All you have to do is tell me what it's worth to you. What's a person worth?
No. What's one worth to you?
Power is when we have every justification to kill, and we don't. The list is life.
Whoever saves one life saves the world entire.
This is certainly not an easy film to watch, and I can probably mention more people than not who have, if they watched it, sat through it once and have said, I'm glad I saw it, but I couldn't see it again, and I think for very good reason.
I'm in that category.
Absolutely. Yeah, now this is, I think, if not the first, then definitely one of the first U.S. mainstream films to deal directly with, to depict, to cinematically, reenact the events of the Holocaust. It had been, there had been TV miniseries before. There had been, references. There was a TV miniseries called Holocaust in 1978 that Meryl Streep actually won her first Emmy for. So it's not as if it hadn't ever been approached. But in terms of mainstream U.S. cinema, this really was the groundbreaker. Released in 1993, and this is the movie that got Spielberg his first Academy Award for Best Director. It also received the award for Best Picture of the Year. It's a very gut-wrenching film. It's extremely realistic in a lot of the images that you see on screen. The deliberate choice to film in black and white to give it more of a documentary-like feel. You have a score that is second to none as far as jarring string instruments and just jolting, unsettling music. It's very technically, it's very skillfully done. And in terms of the intent and purpose behind it, this is the film that, in making the film, Spielberg was inspired to begin, I believe it's called the Shiloh Foundation. I could be wrong.
Shoah Foundation.
Shoah. My apologies.
The
Shoah Foundation, yeah. Where he was looking to interview willing participants, Holocaust survivors, preserve their memories forever so that history would not be forgotten.
This was like such an emotional movie for me. I'm Jewish. And even when I was growing up, and even when he said it, he was growing up, they were talking about Nazis and his family. And it's something you just can't wrap your head around, the kind of hate and killing and mass extermination that happened. And, fortunately, he found a movie that he could depict that and also have a hopefulness in it, because he saved like 1,100 people, 1,100 Jewish people on that list. That's what that list means. And he had no intention of doing that, Schindler. And he had a change of heart along the way, probably brought on by his manager too, who's played by Ben Kingsley in there, Isaac Stern. And the thing that was very touching to me in that movie, and even Spielberg talks about it, they ask why there's this little girl with a red coat in there. And the meaning of it is that she's easily seen, but she's not seen by anyone, just as if, except him. And that kind of changes him because he notices the Nazis not noticing the little girl. I won't say what happens, but it also, to him, to Spielberg, meant how the countries, how our allies knew what was happening and did nothing about it. And it could have saved thousands. Even he even says, even if they had bombed the gas chambers and the concentration camps, they would have killed a lot of people, but they probably would have saved hundreds of thousands more. And so it's, to me, it's a real historical lesson that everyone needs to watch, because it just shows man's humanity to man is just, it's insane. It could be insane. I mean, that's why they say never forget, never forget. So that's how it hit me. I think it hit a lot of people that way. That's why you can't watch it again.
Yeah. No, it was it's a movie that I think once you're ready for it, don't watch it if you're not ready for it. You have to be ready for it, to absorb it, to soak it all in, to process it, and really to try to find the meaning in it. And there is meaning, of course, to be found in it. But it's a movie you need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, that was 1993, Schindler's List, and it would be, Spielberg would of course go on to direct more films, but his next big success would be 1998, 5 years later, the film Amistad in 1997 was pretty much marketed as the next big Spielberg production. Amistad did not catch on as much as I think the hope was, but Spielberg followed it up in the summer of 1998 with what is commonly referred to as the greatest World War II movie ever made, and that would be Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan was a summertime release, 1998. It's a film that is probably just as famous for one of the biggest upsets in Academy Award history. The expectation was that by the 11th hour of the Academy Award ceremony, that once the Best Picture envelope was opened up, that Spielberg's troops would storm the stage. And in a surprise upset, Harrison Ford opened the envelope and he read out that year's Best Picture winner, Shakespeare in Love. So I think that's sort of a little footnote to Saving Private Ryan that they probably were not banking on and probably not too thrilled with. Though Spielberg did take home that same night, he did take home his second Best Director Oscar for this film.
Yeah, that made no sense at all. You watch that movie, and even I saw an interview with him, and he recreated the Normandy beach. Nobody had ever done that. In fact, he said that in the old war movies, they stayed away from showing the what actually happened, in the invasions, and they just showed the aftermath and victory, and what happened, afterwards, the heroes and all that. But he made a movie. Like I saw an interview with Tom Hanks saying that. If you get past the first 26 minutes, then there's more. It sort of sets the stage for the emotion that's going to follow as they go to try to find Private Ryan. But he said when he was doing his first scenes, he said with Steven Spielberg, he had them in the boat, in those boats approaching shore, and he was there, and he said, when they opened it up and they were going towards the beach, the first 3 rows of men got shot. He knew that this was, this was not a movie you could take lightly. You really, this was scary. He said this was a scary movie for him and everyone else who took place in it, even though there was a camera close by and it was, pretend. It did not feel pretend to him or any of the other actors that were in it. So that was very interesting to hear him say that. It is. It looks. I mean, it's filmed. It's as close to, I don't know. Makes you feel like you're in watching an actual war. in World War II with the Nazis. Feels that way.
Yeah, no, I would say that those first 20 to 25 minutes of the film, those are probably among the most, if not the most, realistic battle sequence ever committed to celluloid. And there had been plenty of World War II movies, certainly more than anybody could ever count, even going as far back as the late 40s, early 50s with John Wayne's The Sands of Iwo Jima. So
Right.
Going into the territory of World War II battles was not necessarily a new thing, but movie making, of course, has evolved very much in the decades since. And I think Saving Private Ryan really represented a cosmic shift, if you will, in terms of the, like with Schindler's List, the documentary style filmmaking. The use of handheld camera to make the viewer feel as if they're actually in the midst of all of the chaos, rather than being a third-person objective, sitting there in the theater seats. However, and this is probably where I'm going to get a lot of evil eyes, is after those first 20, 25 minutes of the film, I don't know how much in the minority I am. I'm probably in the minority with this one, but I did not find the rest of the film to be anywhere near as compelling or gripping. I know that it was supposed to be, but I think it was I think primarily because the first 20, 25 minutes, all nonfiction. And then once that sequence ends and the plot of the story really takes off, that is all fiction. So I don't know if that was part of it, but it didn't feel to me that it delivered anywhere near as much as the opening of the film seems to promise that it would. I'm sure that there are plenty who would completely and vehemently disagree with that.
I don't know. I watched, I remember I watched a few more clips of it, of course. The conversation, the banter, the way they talk to each other, it seemed kind of realistic. I mean, I don't know how realistic it's going to be than, than not being there, but the way it was written into the screenplay, it seemed fairly authentic to me. And the part about him being, when he's challenged several times as the captain, Tom Hanks. But the part about when he explains who he is and his background, I thought it was good. I know it might have been a little bit overlong, but I thought it kind of humanized him a little bit more, which, to some degree. I mean, there are people, they're soldiers, but they are people and do have emotions. And I think there was kind of a balancing act that Spielberg was trying to do with that, showing how they were, killing machines, but also people. I don't know. I don't know if you feel that way.
No, I mean, I'm all for, fleshing out characters and giving them a background. I'm completely on board with that. So it's not so much the fact that it was fiction. It was more, for me anyway, it was more, I just found that it's with this film where I began to notice, and continue to this day to notice, Spielberg's tendency, for better or for worse, depending on personal preferences and personal taste, Spielberg's tendency to go more for the melodrama over the authenticity. Of course, there are some exceptions, which we'll get to in a second, but every once in a while in a more recent Spielberg film, I just feel like there are more moments where there is audience manipulation, musical cues, or perhaps a plot twist or a line of dialogue that just feels very contrived, sort of to manufacture.
Do you think it's because he wants to make sure that you get what he feels about this movie, and he wants you to feel that way, so he's like almost hitting you over the head with that?
I think any filmmaker who has who has an intent, hopes to get that intent across clearly, or at least subliminally. So in terms of Spielberg's directorial decisions that might show some may say, some real ingenuity, and others may say, you don't have to be quite so obvious. You don't have to be you don't have to hit the audience over the head with the symbolism. Give them a little bit of credit. I find there are a couple of films in more recent years where I find that happens particularly frequently. Spielberg's films. I think Saving Private Ryan for me was sort of the starting point of that. I'm not saying that on Oscar night, when Shakespeare in Love was announced as the winner, I'm not saying that I said woohoo, Shakespeare in Love got it and Saving Private Ryan didn't. But as far as his quote unquote serious body of work, I didn't think that it was a film that had consistently delivered the goods. But I will say also, by the same token, I feel very differently about the next film that we're going to take a look at. Fast forward now to the year 2005, and Spielberg did a film that, for me, is really, for lack of a better way of putting it, really sort of the holy grail of his directing career. And that was, again, based on a true story, as was Schindler's List. This is the film Munich, about the 1972 Olympics and the Israeli athletes who were captured by terrorists, held hostage, and eventually, tragically executed. Let's take a look at the trailer for Munich, and then we can dive into this one.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking to you live just outside the Olympic Village in Munich, West Germany. At this moment, 8 or 9 athletes of the Israeli team are being held prisoner.
These guerrillas are a group called Black September. The commandos have automatic weapons on the hostages. A deal had been made. Now the Israelis disappeared. Massive security force. In front of us, the Arabs attacked.
They're all gone.
Every civilization finds it necessary to negotiate compromises with its own values.
We want to ask you, will you undertake a mission? You will have to leave the country and your family.
I can't live with refusing this.
We have 11 Palestinian names. Each had a hand in planning Munich. You're going to kill them, one by one. We deposit money into a box that doesn't exist.
200,000 for one name. Am I alone?
You'll have 4 others. They know useful things like documents, cars, cleanup.
He gets in the bed, his weight arms the device.
I give the signal by switching off the light.
It's strange to think of oneself as an assassin.
Think of yourself as something else, then.
What's wrong?
It should have exploded by now.
We found 3 more names for you.
You know how many laws we've broken.
He picks up the phone.
We hit the remote.
Allô? Allô?
We're supposed to be righteous. I lose that. That's my soul.
Dear Papa, don't forget my voice.
You think you can outrun your fears, your doubts?
This one's a punch to the gut. This is one, like Schindler's List, that after you've seen it once, first of all, be prepared before you see it. And then after you see it once, I don't know if I could sit through it again, just even in the context of studying the career of Spielberg. It's just a very, like I said, it's a punch to the gut. And I would say that in terms of filmmaking, this is about as good as it gets when it comes to being a case study and how to build momentum, how to tell a story with pacing, how to tell a story with, as strange as it may sound, a sense of sophistication and dignity to it. There are no cheap thrills. There are no foolish jump scares or anything along those lines that, that it could have very easily gone into the territory of. This one, it's very respectful. It's very respectful of the incidents, the people who were involved, their loved ones. I would say that it is just as informative and just as engrossing as a documentary could be. In fact, I have a documentary that I could recommend called One Day in September, which is, if you're looking for a documentary on this incident as opposed to a Hollywood retelling of a story, this is a good one to go with. One Day in September 1972, during the Olympics.
He based it on a book, I think he said, that depicted the operation, the covert operation of the Israelis after the athletes were executed, and that was okayed by Golda Meir. And he said that about the book itself, that it was never discredited. It was attacked, but it was never discredited. And then they did their own research on it as well. But what I was curious about too is, did you read about whether this story about Avner, I can't think of his last name offhand, in the movie, was that like based on a true story, that he was married and he had a baby, was about to have a baby, and then he went on this covert operation to kill to kill the people responsible for that, for killing the athletes. Did you find anything about that? I didn't.
Well, names were changed, and you had some composite characters, and I'm sure to protect the anonymity of those, especially when the film was released in 2005, those who could very well have still been alive or their families, because it is a very, let's call it what it is. It is a very divisive movie in the sense that it does play politics. In fact, you mentioned Golda Meir. She was depicted in the film towards the end in a scene that was politically charged in terms of the dialogue and in terms of the purpose of including the scene in the film at the point in the story when they put it in. But so I think for those reasons, and I think you have events that have been fabricated for the purposes of dramatic storytelling. You have the names changed, and you do have some people left out. You might even have several real life people who, for the purposes of the film, were combined into one character. We're talking major amounts of layers and layers to every detail of this entire story, and there's no way that any filmmaker can take such a heavy story, compress it into a 2.5 hour long film without having to, make some edits along the way just for the purposes of making the film palatable for mainstream audiences.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't think there was anything, it was sweat producing, I'll tell you that. It's a thriller, and it really, it stays the thriller throughout the whole movie. And you are totally engrossed in the way he filmed this. It's extremely well done movie. Yeah, we shouldn't give away too much of it because people really need to see it. But the acting is very good. Eric Bana stars as the main character, and Daniel Craig is in there as one of his earliest, I think, acting roles, right?
When he became James Bond, I remember thinking to myself at the time, oh, I know that guy. He was in Munich. So a pre-James Bond Daniel Craig, yes.
Yeah. It's a great movie. It is politically charged, that's for sure. And he doesn't shy away from letting the other side make arguments, either the PLO at the time, or of course the Israelis. But it's an engrossing movie. And it's definitely I'd say one of his better movies. And nominated for 5 Academy Awards, right?
Including Best Picture and Best Director too, if I'm not mistaken.
The one Best Picture?
No, it was nominated.
It was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And him nominated for Best Director. He's won 2 Best Directors. Am I right?
Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. Yes.
Yeah.
Next film of a very different sort comes from 2011, and this is based on a Broadway play that in turn was based on a book. This is a World War I themed film, and the title of it is War Horse. Let's take a look at this Best Picture nominees trailer.
What is it?
It's a horse they found wandering about in no man's land.
What kind of an horse?
A miraculous kind of an horse, be my guess.
You that I'll look after him, and if I can, I'll return him to your care.
He's my horse, sir.
Can you imagine flying over a war? And you know you can never look down. You have to look forward, or you'll never get home.
It is an honor to ride beside you. Let every man make himself and his country proud. Be brave! Be brave! Be brave!
If I had to pick a movie out of those Spielberg films that we're talking about today, if I had to pick one that I think has probably the best cinematography, War Horse would be it. There are some absolutely stunning shots of sunsets and landscapes that harken back to the westerns that came out of the so-called golden age of Hollywood. It's like a tribute to John Ford westerns, really. The cinematography is incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. It's incredible, and I'd say this movie, even though it takes place during World War I or at the start of World War I, it's like a fable almost. Like you're watching this movie. It's not a fable, but it's a story of courage of a boy who raises a horse, and the courage of the horse when the horse goes off to war, and it is it's gorgeous cinematography. I guess it was filmed in England. Like I don't know, he said like villages in England that he found, and he couldn't get over himself the beauty of it, and the landscapes and the sunsets and boy, you could see that throughout the movie. But the story itself is it really draws you in. It's an engrossing story, and it's a movie actually that you feel good about when it's at the end of it. You know, a lot of Spielberg movies, they may have a happy ending, but not really, I would say. You go through hell to get to the final ending. But this one I thought really was, I watched it with my wife, and we both liked the movie. I mean, you could sit there and it's a very good movie. It's even a part where the Germans on one side and the English are on one side, and they combine to actually free War Horse. And I won't tell about that any more than that. But it's just, I don't know. By the end of it, it's a feel-good movie. How many feel-good, outside of Spielberg's blockbuster type movies that he makes, how many feel-good serious movies has he made?
I think you're onto something, though. You said that you would not call it a fable. You initially called it a fable and then said you wouldn't call. I think it is a fable, to be honest with you. It's not meant to be a realistic movie,
Right.
in the sense that this is not a World War I movie that is in the same vein as Saving Private Ryan with World War II. This is a story about loyalty. This is a story about perseverance and resilience. This is a story about the power of love, how love conquers all. The Broadway play, I can remember my in-laws, they saw the Broadway play and maintained that it was the best show that they had ever seen. I've never seen it on stage. In the stage version, I know that, of course, they didn't use a real horse. They used wooden, like puppets.
And how would they have shown trenches and all that other stuff in the Broadway play? That, the no man's land area. I guess they could find, make a short version, small version of it. But it's interesting to me how it was a Broadway play first and then the movie.
Yeah. And the movie itself, if you go on to IMDb and take a look at some of the reviews written by IMDb users, like with a lot of films, you have those who champion it and then those who completely tear it to shreds. And that, just for kicks and giggles, I was looking through a couple of the reviews, and those that were tearing it to shreds were calling it unrealistic, and I think that they just don't get that it's meant to be a fable. However, our next movie is anything but a fable. It is a look at one of the most famous American faces in history. This came out 1 year later, 2012. This is Best Picture nominee Lincoln, starring Daniel Day-Lewis.
We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We can't tell our people they can vote yes on abolishing slavery unless at the same time we can tell them that you're seeking a negotiated peace.
It's either the amendment or this Confederate peace. You cannot have both.
How many hundreds of thousands have died during your administration?
Congress must never declare equal those whom God created unequal. Leave the Constitution alone.
We are stepped out upon the world stage now, with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment. Now!
Abraham Lincoln has asked us to work with him to accomplish the death of slavery.
No one's ever been loved so much by the people. Don't waste that power.
This fight is for the United States of America.
Can we choose to be born, or are we fitted to the times we're born into?
Well, I don't know about myself. You may be.
This settles the fate for all coming time. Not only of the millions now in bondage, but of unborn millions to come.
Shall we stop this bleeding?
Lincoln is the film that I would point to if anybody were to question the viability of Spielberg's skill in casting just the right actors for the right roles. I think that this is probably the strongest cast that he has ever assembled for any motion picture, comedy or drama.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is Lincoln in that movie. I mean, he disappears. He looks on his profile, looks exactly like Lincoln, and he was just so good. And the story is just so good. It's not a lot of action like you would see in a lot of Spielberg movies, but boy, what they're talking about with passing the 13th Amendment to end slavery and also trying to end the Civil War over a 4-month period. It's intense dialogue, intense political maneuvering to get it accomplished, and it holds your interest. I mean, whoever wrote that screenplay, the dialogue is excellent in that. You know, with Tommy Lee Jones also as a major actor in that movie, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Sally Field, she more than holds her own against Daniel Day-Lewis. She's incredible as Mary Todd Lincoln. I think she's probably one of the finest roles of her career as well. I just remember the scene when she's in the balcony with him and she says to him, "Woe to you, sir." And that's a very awkward line to deliver for any actor, but she makes it work. She makes that moment work. I can remember watching it in the theater, and as soon as she said that to her husband, as soon as Mary Todd said that to Abraham Lincoln, "Woe to you, sir," I remember someone in the audience going, "Ooh," like, wow, like the power in her voice behind the delivery of that line.
Yeah, no, she was definitely a force behind him. And the other thing I loved about that movie was that it showed Lincoln as the person, as a human being with the family and the difficulties that his own family had. You know, I love that part of it because it humanized him, and it made what he was going through on the political end even more difficult, you know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's refreshing to see a portrayal of someone who tends to be romanticized in history. It's refreshing to see a portrayal that's a bit more grounded and a bit more inclusive of you know, a person, the details in the life of a person who has the same frailties, the same faults as any of us.
Exactly. Yep.
No one is a saint. Next film is from 2015, and it brings Spielberg and Tom Hanks back together again. And here is the trailer for Bridge of Spies.
You've been selected for a mission which you are not to discuss with anyone outside of this room. We are engaged in a war with the Soviet Union. This war does not, for the moment, involve men at arms. It involves information.
Something important has come up.
We've got a Soviet spy.
But there's a wrinkle.
They got our spy pilot? Or the head full of classified information. The Russians want their man back before he cracks.
We want you to negotiate the swap.
I'm an insurance lawyer. I'm not sure I want to pick that up.
Are you good at what you do?
This will be a first for the both of us.
You should be careful.
I'm talking to you about the security of your country.
Why aren't we hanging him? He's a spy!
You're asking me to violate the Constitution.
Do you know how people will look at us? The family of a man trying to free a traitor?
Everyone deserves a defense. Every person matters. Where do they want this negotiation?
East Berlin.
Just tell me that you're not going to be in any danger. I don't even care if it's the truth. Give me something to hold on to.
We need to have the conversation our governments can't.
People in my country consider this an act of war.
You can call it what you want. Let's be clear. Nobody is safe.
We're in a battle for civilization.
The Constitution, it's what makes us Americans. Shouldn't we show our enemies who we are?
Things have started to fall apart.
Is this your position or your government's? Is there any outcome here where I'm not either detained or shot?
Do we need to worry about you?
What's the move?
when you don't know what the game is.
The next mistake our countries make could be the last one.
British Spies, based on the true story of the American U-2 pilot who was shot down over Soviet airspace in the early 1960s, and he survived, of course, and he was captured. And then the negotiations, the Soviets will release him if the United States will release a prisoner of its own, a Russian prisoner of its own. And Tom Hanks plays the negotiator who works like a dog to try to make the whole thing happen.
Yeah, no, it's very well done. Another great Tom Hanks movie, especially as he has evolved himself as an actor, and he really puts himself in this role. He's a very good lawyer, and well, you'll have to see it to see whether he accomplishes or not, getting the trade. But we're running out of time, folks, and we have one more movie, but we don't have time to show it. So that's The Post. I don't know. You want to say 5 seconds about it? It's another Tom Hanks movie that's very good, I would say, and definitely worth watching about the Post, the Vietnam War and the Washington Post, and how they work together anyway. So we're getting down. I just want to thank SMAC and the staff there for helping us put this together. I want to thank Frank Mandosa, of course. Frank, nice job. We always do a great job. And so for Mike Wigdor, go ahead.
No, thank you to the same people, and it's right back at you. No, thanks everyone for watching, and hopefully you'll continue to watch. And
yeah, we'll see you next time, the next episode. So we'll be there. We'll see you then.